My name is Jo, and let's get started. So the objectives for this afternoon is, first of all, we'll have a look at some key knowledge, some revision of topics that you may need to know or sort of are assumed, if you like, when you start using functions such as VLOOKUPs. We'll have an understanding of what a VLOOKUP is and see how that works versus the find feature within Excel. When you're using a lookup, they won't work on all data lists. So we'll have a look at the essential structure for a data list before you can start using a VLOOKUP function. So if your spreadsheet isn't structured right, then a lookup function might not be the best one for you to use. And obviously then throughout this afternoon, we'll have a look at a number of spreadsheets where we'll be using VLOOKUP functions as examples. So I'm going to start with this revision. I'm going to open up a spreadsheet. Here's one that I prepared earlier. So if you're working along with me, this is the one that's called revision at the end of it. So in this revision spreadsheet, I'm just going to have a look at some key features. First of all, I want to have a look at putting formulae and functions in and the order of precedence. So if you've been on Excel with Excel, you'll have seen this. So I apologise if I'm repeating, but it's good to have a refresher. So we have a little sales spreadsheet and we've got different people. So salespeople, Lee's been selling t-shirts at £7, but that £7 has then been discounted by £2, so it gives us 5. And 2 sold at £5 should give us a subtotal of 10. But if I simply put the formula in as D4, the £7, minus E4, the £2, times by F4, times by 2, the answer that gets 3, and we know that the answer should be 10. Do you want to just use the chat panel, and if you could think of the acronym to remember the order of precedence, if anybody can remember that in the chat panel? Fastest finger first here. Dean, give yourself a round of applause. And Lucy, so Dean says BODMAS and Lucy says BIDMAS. Okay, let's have a look at BODMAS/BIDMAS, shall we? So this is the order of precedence. I suppose my generation refer to it as BODMAS as a way of remembering the order of precedence. But if you're in a room now with anybody who's doing their GCSEs, they'll be screaming it's BIDMAS. So what does that stand for? The order of precedence is basically when you type a formula in Excel, if you're using 2 or more operators, Excel takes no notice of the order that you type the operators in. It will perform the formula in the order of BODMAS. So anything in brackets is done first. Any ordinals, like to the power of or square root of, or if you're talking BIDMAS, it's indices, tomato, same thing. It will then divide, multiply, add, and subtract. So in our example, we typed in 7 minus 2 times 2. So Excel would look at that, have a look down BODMAS or BIDMAS, anything in brackets, no, ordinals, no, divide, no, multiply. Yes, there is a 2 times 2. 2 times 2 gives you a subtotal of 4. So all that's left for Excel to do is do 7 minus the 4 that it's already worked out, which gives us that incorrect total of 3. So we do need to then have a look at, well, if brackets comes first, if I put anything in brackets, they're going to get done first in the formula. So if we just to simply add in brackets, just brace around the 7 minus 2, Excel will have to work that bit out first. So 7 minus 2 gives us the 5. And then all that's left is to multiply that by the quantity of 2, giving us the correct answer of 10. So back in our spreadsheet, I just double click in the cell and simply add those brackets in to tell Excel, do that bit first. So once you know what D4 minus E4 is, then you can times it by F4. And that gives us the correct answer of 10. So thank you for those of you that replied to that chat. And I'm just going to fill the formula down. And because the cell references are relative, the formula changes from D4, E4, F4 to D5, E5, F5, all the way down to row 13. You also need to have an understanding of relative and absolute cell references in Excel, often used in a VLOOKUP function. So just to give you a quick recap, relative cell references are just a column and a row, so just a column letter and a row total. So if we just go and have a look. Whereas absolute cell references have got a dollar around them. Do you want to just use the chat? Does anybody know the keyboard shortcut to put the dollars in? Do you want to just use the chat and tell me that? So basically, when you're filling a formula or copying a formula, Sue, well done. Emily, fantastic. There's a lot of you that knows that. Brilliant. Sue, you got in there first. If there was a prize, I would send it to you. So relative cell reference is just a column letter and a row number, whereas absolute has the dollars to fix the cell reference in the formula. So looking at the formula here, I'm going to start by doing equals. So to work out the sales commission for Lee, I'm going to take Lee's subtotal. Now, because I want that to change for Lee from G4 to G5 to G6 when I fill it down, don't need any dollars. And I'm going to multiply it by the 12%. Now, the 12% is fixed in one cell. There's no other percentages. So we need to put the dollar signs around it. And if you think about the spreadsheet, the presentation, the dollar goes before the column letter. So there's a dollar before the column letter and a dollar before the row number. So basically fix column H, fix row 2. In other words, fix the whole of row 2, cell H2, sorry. If you put the dollars in the wrong place, Excel's just going to not have a clue what you're talking about. And we have a lot of people who've just sent me thank you everybody for that, by the way. The keyboard shortcut for putting the dollars in is on one of your function keys at the top of your keyboard, F4. And Excel will put the dollars in for you and they will be in the right place. So no need to worry about getting the dollars in the wrong place. Easy way to remember that is you would need shift and number 4 to type a dollar. So go a line further up and just F4 will do without the shift key. So if I fill this formula down and let's just pick on one here, you can see that the first cell reference that was relative is now relative to row 10, so G10, although H2 is fixed. So it's constant throughout. Because all of these sales commissions are looking back at the 12%, if any changes are made to that figure, so let's change it to 25%, as soon as I press enter, you'll notice that all of those figures will change. Fantastic. So before we have a look at VLOOKUP functions, I just want to recap on functions. Excel has hundreds of them, hundreds of functions. They all live in the insert function area of Excel, all of them in there, or on the formulas ribbon tab in various function libraries. But a function is a predefined formula that does something specific with a cell. So for example, the sum function will add up a list of numbers, and that's its only purpose, is to add up numbers. The average function finds the average from a range of numbers. And it doesn't matter which function you're using in Excel, they're all written in exactly the same way. So all functions start with equals because they're going to do a calculation. You then have the function name, like sum, average, so on. After the function name, there is always, always, always a bracket. Then inside the brackets goes arguments, basically how that function, the information that function needs to calculate the answer. And where you've got an open bracket, you've got a closed bracket. So the sum function is simply the start cell to the end cell and everything in between. So I'm just going to quickly, I know there's lots of ways of doing this, but equals SU. If I click once on the sum function, just using the list, Excel gives me a hint as to what the purpose of that function does. But if I double click, as soon as I've opened the bracket, then Excel stops telling me what the function does and starts telling me what arguments it needs to make it work. I'm just going to highlight the numbers to add up. relative cell references, so D4 to D13 will become E, F, and so on. Or using the average function. So this is what the average does, exactly what I want. And now it tells me the arguments are needed, the numbers to find the average of. Perfect. Fill that across as well. Just one last thing before we look at functions is VLOOKUPs often pull information from other worksheets. So all of these formulas that we've put together, the data is being held on the sheet that we're actually working in. And that's not always the case with VLOOKUPs. Quite often the data looks from other sheets. And I suppose it's having an understanding of how to read a formula and understand what Excel's telling you. So when you're pulling information from another worksheet, Excel will, first of all, when you include it, after the equals, it will tell you the name of the sheet where the data came from. It'll tell you the cell reference as well, and it will put an exclamation mark to separate those sheets. So if you had a workbook with 12 sheets, one for each month of the year, this is telling me it's pulling data from the worksheet called January in cell A1. You can type all that lot in, but to be honest, you can just click with your mouse. So in this monthly total worksheet here, I want to know what the monthly total is for t-shirt sales, and I have 4 individual t-shirt sales, one for each of the 4 weeks of the month. But I don't want to type all those exclamation marky things in, so I'm going to start where the first formula is going to go, put equals in as standard, and I'm simply going to click on the first worksheet to include in the formula. Now notice up at the top of the screen it's already typed in the name of the sheet and put the exclamation mark in. But I don't want to take information just from week 1. I want to take information from week 1 through to week 4. So if I hold down my shift key to select a range and click on week 4, I can see now Excel's telling me it's pulling information from week 1 to week 4 and everything in between. But I don't want to add everything, every single cell on every single sheet. I just want the t-shirt values. So simply clicking cell B2, Excel is going to now add up from week 1 to week 4 worksheets, but just the cell B2. One key thing to remember when you're pulling information from another sheet is never click back on the sheet where you started the formula. Just press the tick, enter or tab to accept the formula, and Excel will take you back to where you started anyway. So I'm just going to press enter. Spot the mistake. Haven't told it what to do with the data. So yes, it would be handy if it knew that it needed to sum that little lot up. Excellent. There's simply cell references, so that are relative, so I can still fill the formula down. I didn't really want it to lose that blue and bold formatting there, so I could reapply it or just use the autofill options to fill without the formatting. So leave the formatting as it was. So those are just some revision of topics. So things for you to remember, like the BODMAS acronym, relative and absolute cell references and the dollars, functions, equals function name, open and close brackets with the arguments in between. And when you're referring to other worksheets, you have the sheet name, exclamation mark, and cell name. So I'm going to switch now to a spreadsheet. If you're working along with me, this is the one called LookUps. So I want to start now by having a look at lookup functions and what they do and why they work. There are 3 lookup functions. One of them is just equals lookup, which isn't used very much because it can only reference data with 1 column or 1 row. My spreadsheets have always got more than that. The most popular lookup functions are VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. Anybody want to hazard a guess what V and H might stand for? You can use your chat. Let's see who gets in there first. So Dean, again, fantastic. You're on a roll this afternoon. So V is a vertical lookup and H is a horizontal lookup. Thank you, fantastic. So the idea of a vertical lookup is for spreadsheets where you've got data that grows vertically down. So the data grows down one row, one row, one row. A horizontal lookup would be where you have data with headings down the side, and then you add data to columns, maybe January, February, March, April, May, and so on. So because spreadsheets generally have headings across the top and the data grows downwards, that's why the VLOOKUP is just a little bit more popular than the HLOOKUP. I'm just going to start at the top here because VLOOKUP is a little bit like the find feature. So basically what I want to know from this spreadsheet is Mark's salary. Now I could use the find feature. So if I just go find or Control and F, type Mark in the spreadsheet, and I'm only wanting it really to look down the first names, but when I press find next, it's doing it sort of across and down. So I didn't want that one, so find next again. And now it's found Mark in marker tin, but I only really wanted it to look down this first column, so this is quite time consuming for me. Finally, it's found Mark for me. It's exactly what I wanted. But all the find feature does is takes you to the cell within your spreadsheet. I mean, it's great if your spreadsheet's got thousands of rows, it will quickly take you there. But I want to know Mark's salary. Well, all find's done is taken me to the cell. It's now up to me to manually get Mark's salary, copy it, and paste it where I want the salary to go. And if I change my mind, and instead of Mark, I want to find Peter, I have to start again, delete that salary, and replace it with the correct one. What the VLOOKUP function does is it will find some data in a spreadsheet. So if I was looking for Mark, it would find that data within a table, so within this table. The VLOOKUP function, this is really important to remember, the VLOOK function will only ever find the data that you're trying to find in the leftmost column of the table. So it would try and find Mark in the leftmost column of this table. I would then need to tell the VLOOKUP which column I want to extract data from. So from this table, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns. Ignoring the column letter, the salary is in the 6th column across, and I'd like to find an exact match. That's all the VLOOKUP is going to need from me, and it would have done that without me having all the stress. So let's have a look at some VLOOKUPs in action. I'm going to go to the company's worksheet. So because the VLOOKUP can only look up data in the leftmost column of a table, it is quite important that that data is organised correctly and that it follows the rules of a data list. So there's no blank columns, no blank rows, blank cells are fine. The headings need to be on the first row only, so I'm just going to get rid of ID, put it in there, customer ID. It's also important to remember that VLOOKUP functions will only find unique entries. So in my leftmost column here, these entries are all unique. However, if the company name was my leftmost column, then there is a duplication in here. So same company name, different address, different contact, and so on. But Excel would only ever find the first one. So if I wanted the telephone number for the first one, I'd only ever find the first telephone number and not the second one. So we need some unique entries for Excel to find. And if we're talking values, text values, they really need to be in ascending order. So good structuring of your table. And in our first example here, I want to find a date that a course is running. So you'll notice that the leftmost column, I've got course codes in there, and they're all unique. So PPT1, it tells me the date that that course is running is the 4th of March. Excellent. If I go and change the course code, it's not case sensitive, by the way. 5th of June and the 5th of June in here. And the reason that's working is because this is driven by a VLOOKUP function. So rather than me using the find facility, go into Excel 1, copying and pasting the date in there, I simply type the course that I'm looking for, and hey presto, the VLOOKUP gives me the results. If I needed more data, like the course title as well, I need more VLOOKUPs. Simple as that. So looking at this VLOOKUP function, double click on the cell. So how a VLOOKUP function works, so the arguments that a VLOOKUP function needs is, first of all, inside the brackets, it says what is the lookup value. So how will I know what you're looking for? So I've referenced cell E4 as my lookup value. So I'm just going to press escape. So this is E4. So whatever I type in E4, Excel uses that as the lookup value. Next thing it needs from me is the table array. So my table is A4 to C15. Okay, so I will just make that yellow just to reference it. So we've basically said, whatever I put in there, you can go and find it for me in the leftmost column of that little table. Perfect. Going back to the lookup function. So Excel knows where to look, what to find, it knows which table it will find it in. And the next thing it says is call index num. So column index number. And you can see there I've got a number 3. So what Excel will do from this table that we've referenced in the VLOOKUP, instead of it looking for column A, column B, column C, it will refer to this as the first column in the table, the second column in the table, and the third column in the table. So I would like to know the date from the third column of that table. And the reason Excel does that is your spreadsheet might not start in column A. So this table range, E4 to G15 as it is now, that's still the first column in the table, second column in the table, third column in the table, not in the entire spreadsheet. Finally, with the VLOOKUP function, so we've got false there. Opposite to false, anybody want to give me an option? I always think this is the backwards way around, to be honest. True or false, we've got the answers, possible answers at the end there. False at the end means it has to be an exact match. Well done, June. So false would mean it has to find an exact match. True would mean it can find a near match. So let me just press escape here. So we've got Excel level 1, 2 and 3 courses, and our VLOOKUP says false at the end of it. If I try and find an Excel level 4 course, which doesn't exist, press enter, then Excel, the VLOOKUP function returns me an NA because of that false at the end. So basically it's saying you can only find exact matches. Okay, so this time I'm going to take that false at the end of my VLOOKUP function and change it to true to find an approximate match. Now I'll try and find an Excel level 4 course. Now to me, I'm thinking perfect, Excel level course is on the 8th of May. It's actually not. Excel has found the nearest match and it's giving me the date from the Excel level 3 course on the 8th of May. I've already done Excel level 3 and turn up on this one thinking it's a level 4. I'm not going to be very happy. So that's how you break down, that's how you put a VLOOKUP function together. So just to recap on VLOOKUP functions, which clearly didn't save it, we've got in this spreadsheet, so you start the formula, your lookup cell, your table array, the column index number, and true or false, near or exact match at the end. So let's have a look at some examples. So from this small spreadsheet here, I would like to find out telephone numbers for different people. So I'm going to use the drop down arrow and pick a name. So I'll pick Frank from there. This is where the VLOOKUP function is going to go, and there's different ways I can put this in. If you use a VLOOKUP function every now and again, so not on a day-to-day basis, it's nice to have the backup of the insert function feature to walk you through the process. Notice the formula bar is completely empty. And when I go into insert function, I'm going to search for VLOOKUP because the spreadsheet's organised vertically. And it's the VLOOKUP function I want. It confirms the arguments I'm going to need. I've got all that in my spreadsheet and tells me what it's going to do. Notice it mentions about sorting in ascending order. This isn't. It will still work fine because they're all unique. When I click OK, by the way, already an equals there in the formula. I didn't put that in. So I click OK to continue. And Excel has automatically typed in VLOOKUP. It's got the start and the end brackets. And now it's brought up the different arguments for me to fill in. So the lookup value, it's even giving me a hint. The lookup value is what you want to find in the first column of the table. It can be a value, a reference, a text string. Well, whoever I select from E1, so whoever I select from that drop-down list, that's what I want you to go and find. Okay, notice how it's confirming. Well, at the moment that says Frank. Table array. Okay, I could highlight the table excluding the headings. I could highlight the table including the headings. I don't have any people who are actually called name or anything department or extension number, so that would be irrelevant. However, if I leave my range finishing at row 14, if there's more people that are added to the list, I'm going to have to go and change the lookup function. So instead, I'm going to highlight the whole of column B, A, B, and C. So go and find me Frank in the leftmost column of A to C. And the column index number, so I want the extension number, which is in the 1, 2, 3, third column across that table. So my index number is 3. And notice how range lookup in here isn't in bold, whereas these are. So this is an optional argument. If I click in here, how come it's optional? So it says if you want to find an exact match, type false. If you want to find a near match, then type true. Or if you just omit it, leave it blank, it will assume it's true. So I want this to be false. Or 0 does exactly the same thing as false. Put false in there. And have a look down at the bottom here. It's automatically telling me the number for Frank. So it's a good check. So if that was wrong, I'd be like, I must have done something wrong in the formula. But I haven't. It all seems fine. And look at the formula bar. Excel's done all the commas and the brackets and the function name. All I need to concentrate on in here is filling in those blanks for Excel. OK, when you're done, and there you have a VLOOKUP. Because this is the lookup cell, each time you change the name, the telephone number is displayed using the lookup. Make sense to everybody? Fabulous. OK. Getting to that time of day. Takeaways are opening again now, though, so I want to have a look at my takeaway menu, and I'd like to order a number 7. I'm not sure what that is. So underneath, I would like Excel to confirm to me what that description is and what the price is. So for the description, I could use the FX, but this time I'm going to type the VLOOKUP in. So equals V, and Excel shows me all the functions beginning with V, and it's VLOOKUP that I'm looking for. It explains what the function does for me, and as soon as I double click or hit tab on VLOOKUP, after the brackets come up, underneath the cell, Excel's giving me hints as to the different arguments I'm going to need for this function. The one that's in bold is the one that I need to answer now. So what's the lookup value? So how does Excel know what I want to order? Well, I typed it in that cell. So I want to look up whatever I type in that cell. Notice how I need to put a comma in to move on. So I type a comma in the formula. So whatever I put in 5, go and find it, comma. It now needs the table array. So I'm going to highlight this table. We could have done the whole columns again. Okay, so you will find whatever I put in F5 in the leftmost column of A1 to C21. Okay, comma. What column is the description in? So from my table, the column is in the 1, 2, second column. One more comma, and at the end it's, do you want a true match or a false match? Do you want an approximate match or do you want an exact match? And I suppose this is a little bit like Tesco's delivery or supermarket deliveries. If you can't get a 4-pack of toilet roll, they might send you a 6-pack or a 2-pack. You get something rather than nothing. So if there's no number 7, do you want me to just give you something else? I'm going to think no on this one because I'm quite a fussy eater. I'm actually not, I'll eat anything. So I'm going to double click on false. So I want an exact match. If you don't close the brackets, Excel will, and press enter. So number 7 is chips. Okay, what if I wanted number 15 is chop suey? Fantastic. But I need more information about this item. Don't just want the description, I want the price as well. So on the revision, we talked about relative and absolute cell referencing. Now, if I just fill this formula down, F5 is going to drop down to F6. A1 is going to drop down to A2. C21 is going to drop down to C22. So I'm not going to change. I'm always going to be looking in cell F5 for my item. So I'm going to press F4. The table always starts in A1. I'm going to press F4. It finishes in C21. I'm going to press F4. So we've got a lot more dollars in there. It makes it a little bit more complicated to work with, but it's just cell references that are now fixed rather than relative. Now when I fill the formula down, all that's left for me to do is to tell Excel the data that I want to show for the price is not in the second column across here now. It's now in the third column across, and the price is £2.60, whereas those chips are 80p. Hope this is all making sense to you. So we've had a little look there at some, I'll just make this a bit bigger, at some VLOOKUPs that are using exact matches. It doesn't stand to reason that you would always use an exact match. So this example that I've got here will demonstrate why you might want to use a near match. So we've got different people who've been spending different amounts during lockdown on their credit cards. So Jen spent £1,000. Now the cashback that she gets by spending £1,000, so spend that value, she's going to get 40 quid cashback. Fantastic. June, you've been spending again. June has spent 5,500. So on spending 5,500, June will get 220 cashback. Not real June, sorry. Now Jean has spent 5,999. There isn't an exact 9,999 in the list. So poor old Jean would get nothing if we were to put an exact match on the VLOOKUP. So with a near match, what Excel would do is would go, oh, I've reached this 5,500, I've reached it, I've not yet exceeded it. So Jean will also get the 5,999 cashback value of 220 quid. So let's see how that works. So we'll start with equals VLOOKUP, open brackets. So what value are you trying to find? Well, for Jane, it's how much she spent. That's what I'm trying to find. Where's the table that I'm looking in? Column F to G, comma. And the cashback value is in which column across that table? Well, it's in the second column of the table. Not necessarily the second column in the sheet, but the second column in the lookup table. And you want to find a near match or an exact match. Let's start with exact. Looking at the formula, B2 is relative. I want it to change to B3, B4, B5. I don't need the dollars round F and G because it's doing the whole columns anyway. So I can simply fill that formula down. So poor old Jean gets nothing. However, if we go back to that VLOOKUP function and at the end change the exact match, false, to an approximate match, true, refill the formula. Excellent. Now Jean gets that 220. It would have been worth spending a penny more just so that you get 240 back. But it finds the nearest match, so it's match, 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 match. Hasn't quite reached the 6,000, so gives you its nearest match. So that's why you might want to use an exact and a near match. You often get errors in VLOOKUP functions, and this is one of the most common ones. And with this VLOOKUP function, I'm going to be pulling information in from another spreadsheet. So, for example, in this invoice spreadsheet, I have some product references in column B. I need to know what that product is. I've no idea what a number 5 is or a number 20. So I'm going to use the VLOOKUP to do that. And I also want to use find the unit price. So the VLOOKUP will do that too. Okay. So starting off with the first product, we'll do the first one, make sure it's right, and then fill it. Start it off with equals. I want a VLOOKUP. And the lookup value is the reference that I have in here, comma. The table array this time isn't anywhere on this spreadsheet, so I'm going to have to look at the goods worksheet and notice how the formula has included the worksheet name followed by that exclamation mark that we talked about earlier. This spreadsheet all looks okay. So on the goods worksheet, the table, so Excel is still looking for that table array. Remember, you've still got the tip on your screen. So I want to look up B15 in the leftmost column of the A to C on the goods worksheet, comma. The description is in the second column across, and I do want an exact match here. Okay. Remember what I was saying earlier about when you're doing a 3D formula, never to click back on the sheet that you started from. So I'm just going to, you don't have to close the brackets either. Excel will do that for you. Press enter, and hey presto, we're returned to our spreadsheet. Now we've got an NA here. Now I know that B15, that's what I'm trying to find, reference number 1. Well, there is a reference number 1, and it's a grey suit. So how come this VLOOKUP is giving me an error? And you might want to send me a message if you've had this issue previously with VLOOKUPs. You might want to just say yes or no. It's generally to do with the underlying data. It is, Neil, exactly, it's the data type. It's generally to do with the underlying data because you're not always in control of where this data's come from. It might have been downloaded from another system. And where the data here is a counting format, this data here is actually text, and it shouldn't be. It should be a number. So all of these are formatted as text. Now there's functions in Excel that would convert it for you. I'm just going to do a little bit of formatting really. So I'm just going to highlight those cells. I don't want them to be text. I want them to be just a general format. Now that in itself won't work. If I go back to invoice, still got an A, so that in itself didn't work. So I'm going to copy the whole range and then paste in just the numbers. Now notice how each of these have now got this error message, and the error message is all the same, and it says the numbers formatted as text, or it's got apostrophe in it. Okay, well, can you please convert them to a number for me then? Thank you. Perfect. So now if I go back to our invoice, it knows that number 1 is a grey suit. Do I need any absolute cell references, any dollars to fill this down? So if we have a look, B15 is going to become B16, B17, B18, and so on. And we've referenced whole columns, so don't necessarily need any, and fill it down. Perfect, Neil. However, I want to put a VLOOKUP in for the unit price. So let's go back to this formula and think about if I was filling it across. Well, the reference is in column B. So I don't want column B changing to column C when I drag the formula across. However, I do still want the 15 to change to 16, to 17, to 18 to find the price for blazer, scarf and socks and so on. So I'm just going to put $1 in before the column. So basically I'm saying fix column B. So when I drag left and right, keep the B. Don't change it to C or D. Neil, fantastic. Neil put the formula in for me here. So I need to keep the B fixed. But I also, when I drag across, need to tell Excel, well, on the goods worksheet, the data's still going to be in columns A to C, not B to D. So I'm going to put dollars around those two. Fantastic. So if I fill the formula across to the first unit price, all I have to do is basically say, actually, on the goods worksheet, go back, the description's in the second column, but the price is in the third. So we're just going to change the column reference to 3. Okay, notice how it's all still working. Fill the formula down and maybe just change some column widths if the values are wrong. Okay, so if we change any of the data in here, so that blazer item 20 is $99.99, a bit expensive for a blazer. So that blazer, we'll change that to a jacket to 20 quid. Back in our invoice, that blazer is now a jacket at 20. So that's information pulling across worksheets. Similar example, this last example that I'm going to show you is I have 3 worksheets. So these are the 3 green ones that I'm going to work with together. So I have personnel details. Anybody who uses Access will know that you can have a relational data sheet, relational data. Yes, relational data across sheets. Can't do that in Excel unless you're using a VLOOKUP. So on personnel details, I've got the standard details. Everybody's got their own unique ID number. Now on bank details, which I want to put in here, I want to bring all this data together into an amalgamated spreadsheet. Database, that's the word I'm looking for. So personnel details, I want to pull the information in. So looking at bank details, that's great. And my instinct would be to select the details and copy and paste. But the data here, the personnel numbers in the bank records, aren't in the same order as they are in personnel. And there's a couple of IDs in here that don't exist in personnel. And I can see that there's a number 4 missing as well. So without an awful lot of cross-reference and jumping between sheets, there's no way that copy and paste is going to work. So I'm going to resort to using a VLOOKUP. So for the bank, we'll start off with the bank. And we're going to use a VLOOKUP. I'm going to hit tab there to say that's the one I want. And for then, that's the value that all the worksheets have in common. All the worksheets have an ID number to cross-reference. So find that number, comma, in the leftmost column of the bank details sheet. And I'm going to highlight the whole data, comma. The name of the bank is in the 1, 2, second column across. And yes, most definitely, it needs to be an exact match. And enter. Okay. So when I'm filling this data down, I don't need that to be relative. Bank details, that's all fine. And I can just fill this down. So number 4, I'm getting an NA. If I go to the bank details, that's because number 4 doesn't exist in here. And I'm not sure what Halifax is either. Let's put an A in there. If I change that to a number 4, maybe it's an error. We now have Halifax. I know I can fill this across, but before I do, I just want to show you sort of like a hint for if you're counting columns across, particularly if your data is going across maybe to column AA or whatever. So if we start off with equals VLOOKUP, I still want to find Ben's ID number, comma, in the leftmost column of bank details, Oh, watch the tip as I'm dragging across. I can't point with my mouse, can I? Can you see just above the column there if I move towards it? Excel's telling me how many row numbers there are. And if you look, it says times 2C, times 2 columns, times 3 columns, times 4 columns. So as you're dragging across, Excel will count the columns for you. So if my data went to column L, I can see, well, that's column 12. It's telling me that. The account number's in the third column. So just use that little tip as you're putting your formula together. I do need to be pulling data from the second column as we counted across there, and I want it to be an exact match. Oh, the account number I wanted, wasn't it? Not the bank. Never mind. We'll change that to a 3. To fill that formula, so just one last time, in order to fill the formula, the ID number that I'm looking for Ben is on row 2, for Jen is on row 3, Ken is on row 4. So I don't want to fix the row number, but I do want to fix the column. So the idea is that always in column A, and the data in bank details is always in A to D. Now when I fill this formula across, I can just change the column number from 2 to 3 for the account number, and then 2 to 4 for the sort code, fill the formula down, and it's just so quick to pull information in from another sheet using a VLOOKUP and combining different sheets, absolute, relative, cell referencing to get the data that you need. And I think I've overrun slightly there. I'm really sorry, by a couple of minutes. So I think hopefully that's giving you a bit of an understanding about what you can do with VLOOKUPs and how to put them together and some examples. Please feel free to have a go with those spreadsheets that I put in the handout section. Before we finish, can I just ask, has anybody got any questions? No? Well, I think by now everybody knows where I am. Everybody's got my email address. So please do feel free to email me if you've got any questions going forward. The webinars that we've got, one more tomorrow, will be putting next week's on tomorrow. So our website will have all the registration links. And don't forget, this webinar will be on our website as well, probably from about 10 o'clock tomorrow. So please feel free to go back and review it. Thank you all again for coming. Please take a second or two to complete the evaluation at the end. I hope to see you again on another webinar, but please do keep safe and take care and stay in. Thank you. Bye.